So I have told you why it is called as first hand, because the data will not be published anywhere. So he is going to collect the data for the first time. So it is called as what? First hand information from the respondents. So when they want to increase their profit, of course they want to increase their sales, correct? So for that reason, business will contact the consumers. After identifying the source of data, the next step is to collect or is to select a particular source of data from which the needed data can be collected. Hello everyone, I am Harshita, lecturer, Department of Commerce, Vidhyaashram First Grade College, the Temple of Excellence, Mysuru. My dear students, we were discussing about the subject, that is business research method, and today we are in the third unit, and the third unit is data collection. So we have already learnt about introduction to business research, and we have learnt about business research design, and your third unit is about data collection. Let us see what are the concepts what you are going to learn in this particular unit. So today we shall directly begin the session. So it is a very interesting unit of business research method, that is how the data or how the information has to be collected. Now we shall directly go through the introduction. The task of data collection begins after the research problem has been defined and the research design or plan has been chalked out. So of course, I have told you in the business research process, first thing what you are going to do is we have to identify the problem. So if we identify the problem successfully, then our problem is half solved. Then the remaining problem, how we are going to solve that? So for that we have to collect sufficient information, sufficient data has to be collected, so that we are going to learn under this particular unit. So this sentence tells that, so data collection starts from identification of problem. After that we will prepare a research design, then we will start collecting the data. So while deciding about the method of data collection to be used for the study, the researcher should keep in mind two types of data, that is primary data and secondary data. So here the researcher, what he'll do, he have identified the problem, he knows the objectives, he have prepared a proper research design within which all the research activity has to be conducted. Now in order to solve the problem, what he has to do, he has to collect sufficient amount of information or sufficient data so that the problem can be solved easily. For that reason, he may select primary data or secondary data. So there are two types of data. One is primary data, other one is secondary data. So in this whole unit, you are going to learn about this primary data and secondary data. So let us discuss in detail what is this primary data. So methods of data collection, one is primary data collection and the second one is secondary data collection. So these are the two important methods to collect the data. Now we shall discuss about primary data. Now what is this primary data? So before going through the explanation, I'll tell you, so primary data means what? The data which is collected for the first time by the researcher. So here he will not get any other information or already published information. For the first time, researcher will collect the new data, that is raw data. That is called as what? Primary data. So there are many sources. So there are many options to collect this primary data. So that we will discuss in this particular session. So information and statistics. So of course, in order to solve the problem, we need sufficient information as well as sufficient data. So information and statistics collected for the first time. So you have to remember here, it is collected for the first time by field survey are called as what? Primary data. Now I have told you he will not have any other information, that is from the previous research also he will not get any other information. By himself he has to collect the data. So the data which is collected by the researcher for the first time by the field survey. So he can't sit at home and collect the information. So he has to go outside, he has to search the respondents, he has to collect the information from them. So that is called as what? Primary data. So in this, the researcher will contact the respondents. So respondents means what? The person from whom the data has to be collected. So they are called as respondents. So in this, the researcher will contact the respondents personally. So he has to contact the respondent personally and collect the first-hand information for the specific research problem. So I have told you why it is called as first-hand, because the data will not be published anywhere. So he is going to collect the data for the first time. So it is called as what? First-hand information from the respondents. So the primary data contains the original attribute. Now this is the original data. It is not the process data what the researcher will get. It is the original data and it is a raw data, and it is also termed as first-hand data where the researcher is going to collect for the first time. According to David L. Luck, so let us see a definition here, that is according to David J. Luck and others, the primary data is the information that was first reviewed. So it was first reviewed and recorded by the researcher in their experiments. So in their experience, so what they are going to do, they are going to collect their data for the first time and it has been first reviewed. So you will not get any other previous data for this purpose. So they are termed as what? Primary data. Now let us see the important topic, that is sources of primary data. So you might get a question, and 100% you will get a question on this primary data and secondary data, where they might ask, explain primary data and what are its sources, or what is primary data, explain its sources. Or what is secondary data, explain its sources. Or you might get a question, explain about primary and secondary sources of data, where you have to combine all the primary data sources and secondary data sources and you have to write the answer. Now we shall see what are the sources, from where do we get this primary data. So I have told you, here the respondent is going to, or here the researcher is going to collect the data for the first time. So from where do he collect? So from where does he collect? So that we are termed as sources of primary data. So primary data can be collected from the individuals. So it can be collected from the individuals or organization or any other specific informant groups. So here the primary data can be collected either from individuals or from any other organizations or from any other specific informant groups. So in all cases, individuals plays a major role and the person is a primary source for this type of data. So mainly the data will be collected from where? From the individuals, that is from the persons or from the respondents. The data obtained from them will be diversified in nature. So whatever the information the researcher will collect from the primary sources, it will not be the same. It is different from one person to another, that is from one respondent to another. So it is not identical in nature. It depends upon the nature and behavior of the individuals. So here each and every respondent will give their own opinion about a particular topic or about a particular problem. So here all the respondents or all the information what the researcher will get, it will not be the same. It will be different from one person to another person. The choice of a particular source of data depends upon the purpose of business research. Now, on which choice, whether they have to go for primary source or whether they have to go for secondary source, it mainly depends upon the researcher and the problem what he has to solve in the future. So it's not that a particular researcher has to go for only primary source or only for secondary source. It depends upon the information what he needs. Based on that, he will collect the or he will select the source. For industries, source of data are business organization. So for an manufacturing industry, the source of information will be the business organization. So here the business organization will sell the products. Now the industry will manufacture the product, but all other activity, that is, in order to reach it to the ultimate consumer, who will do that? Business organization. Now, for an industry, the main source of information will be the business organization. And on the other hand, for business units, the source of data will be the consumer. Now, for business, in order to increase their profit, so when they want to increase their profit, of course, they want to increase their sales, correct? So, for that reason, business will contact the consumers. So, according to the taste and preference of the consumers, business will give the products, or business will supply the products. For business or for the industries, where do they get the source? They will get the source from the business. Suppose if there is more sales in the business, then the industry will produce the same product. So, it's all depends upon the taste and preference of the consumer. So, they are interrelated to each other. So, it's not that the source of the information depends upon the researcher and the problem what he is going to solve. After identifying the source of data, the next step is to collect or is to select a particular source of data from which the needed data can be collected. Now, I have identified that I have to go for primary source. So, in primary source, which source I have to select? In primary source also, there are number of methods to collect the data. So, after selecting the primary source, again, in the primary source, which are the methods to collect the data? So, that I have to identify. The method of collection of data will depend upon the objective and nature of the research study. So, this I have already told you, it's all depends upon the objective as well as nature of research study. Methods for collecting the data are broadly classified into two groups. That is, under primary source, we have broadly classified into two groups. They are observation method as well as communication method. So, under primary source, don't get confused here. So, under the primary source itself, it has been divided into two types, that is observation method and communication method. So, let us see what is this observation method. Now, if you see this chart here, so I have clearly given sources of data. So, here there are mainly two sources, that is two sources of primary data. They are observation method and communication method. So, this is of sources of primary data. We have two types, observation method and communication method. And observation method, they can go for audit method or recording method or behavioral studies. Now, coming to the communication method, there are several methods here. Personal interview method, telephone interview method, mail interview method, panel interview method. Now, under observation method, by observation itself, the researcher will collect the information. So, it is termed as observation method. Here, there is no communication. They are just going to observe and they are going to collect the information. Whereas, coming to the communication method, so they are communicating with the respondents. So, here there are several ways how they are going to communicate with the respondents. So, they can go for personal interview, that is personally they can collect the information by conducting the interview, or through telephone, or through mail, or through panel interview. So, we are going to discuss in detail one by one. So, time being, you just know what is the meaning of this. Next, under personal interview itself, we have structured direct interview method. Next one is unstructured direct interview method. Next one is structured and indirect interview method. And the next one is unstructured and indirect interview method. So, these are the several types or several sources of data collection under primary sources. So, there are mainly two types, observation method as well as communication method. Now, we shall go through observation method. So, in today's session, we are going to just discuss about observation method. Remember, this is one type of primary source, that is observation method. Now, what do you mean by observation method? Here, I have told you there is no communication between the respondent. So, what the researcher will do? The researcher will collect the information by observing the activities of the respondents, that is activities of the consumers or activities of any other thing. Then he will observe each and everything, that is it may be behavior, their beliefs, everything he will observe in detail and he will collect the information. That is called as what? Observation method. So, let us see about observation method here. The observation method is the most effective method for collecting the primary data. So, it is one of the most effective method, that is most important method to collect the primary data. This method is extensively used while collecting the information from the present and previous behavior of the respondents. So, in order to check the behavior of the respondents, so this method is being used. That is, in order to check the present as well as previous behavior of the respondents, this observation method is used. So, in this method, data are recorded after observing the behavior. So, this I have told you how the data has been collected or how the information is been collected by observing the behavior of the respondents or action or situation with great care and caution. Now, here, being a researcher, he has to observe each and every activities of the respondents and he has to note down each and every activity based on which the research problem can be solved. Human beings or machines, now how they are going to observe? So, they can observe by personally, that is through human beings or machines can be used to put the observation method into practice. Now, how the observation will be made? Either personally the researcher can observe or he can appoint someone to observe the activities of the respondents, or he can take a machine in order to record the activities, in order to observe the activities of respondents. In human observation, so I have told you the observation can be made either by human or to machines. Now, under human observation, expert persons are deputed, that is, they are being appointed to grasp the situation or the behavior of the respondents. Now, here the expert persons, they will see each and every activities of the respondents. So, under mechanical observation will be recorded with the help of electronic equipments. Now, under mechanical observation, what they are going to do? They are going to observe through electronic equipments. The mechanical observation will include capturing situations. So, they will capture a particular situation, recording conversation. So, it might record the conversations of the respondents, capturing pictures with cameras, etc. So, under machine, they might use the technology and capture everything. So, it may be conversations, situations, capturing pictures, etc. through cameras. Besides this, interview method is costlier when compared to observation method. So, when compared to interview method, this observation method is what? It is interview method is costlier when compared to observation method. In the sense, observation method is cheaper than interview method. However, observation method removes all those drawbacks which are found in case of interview method. So, through observation method, all the drawbacks what the interview method is having, it can be successfully removed. Now, we shall see the advantages of observation method. Let us see what are the main advantages of observation method. So, one you know, that is it is cheaper than interview method, and the next one is the results. So, the drawbacks what the interview method is having, it can be easily solved through observation method. Now, let us see the advantages one by one. So, the first one is actual or habits of persons are observed. Now, here I have told you they will use either human beings or machines to observe the activities of the researchers, that is of the respondents. So, in that situation, actual, so they can get the correct situation. So, they can capture the correct situation, that is actual or habits of the persons are observed. Next one is obtain information from those who are unable to effectively communicate in written or oral form. So, from those respondents who don't know how to communicate or don't know how to write, in that situation, this observation method is very suitable, because there are certain respondents, there are special group of respondents who cannot communicate properly with the researcher. In that situation, the researcher can observe each and every activities of respondents and they can collect the information. Next one is no better way to gather information other than observation. So, When compared to any other type of sources, observation method is the best source to collect the information and more reliable method of data collection. So, whatever the data collected through observation method is more reliable when compared to other methods. Now, coming to the disadvantages. So, disadvantages of observation method. Let us see what are the disadvantages. So, the first one is result of observation depends on the skill of the observer. Of course, I have told you the observation can be done to, that is human beings or machines. But machine will record properly. But what about human beings? So, I have clearly told you they have to appoint an expert observer. So, here the disadvantage is that expert observer can only record the information. Other person, so who cannot observe properly, so who don't have better observation skill, they cannot be suitable for this method. That is, result of observation depends on the skill of the observer. You should be a sharp observer. You should be a very good observer. Then only each and every activities of the respondents can be identified properly. Next one, opinions and attitudes cannot be obtained by observation. Of course, here under observation method, the main drawback is that here they are going to observe properly, but there is no communication. So, communication may be different, but what we see outside will be different. In that situation, the opinion and attitudes of the respondents cannot be measured here. So, we cannot get the opinion. So, because there is no communication here, we cannot get the opinion of the respondents. At the same time, we don't know what is the attitude of the respondents. So, it is highly impossible to collect such type of information through observation method. Next one is, it should be expensive to tie up personnel in such task. Now, I have told you, so normal person cannot observe each and everything. A specialized person has to be appointed. So, it may be quite expensive to appoint such type of persons. So, it should be a good person who has well grasping power to record or to observe each and everything. In that situation, it might be quite expensive to appoint that personnel. Next one is, the researcher findings are limited to those observed. So, whatever the things what they are going to observe, only that much they are going to record. Other than that, they will not get any other extra idea or extra information through observation method. So, it is limited. So, the findings are limited only to the observation. So, these are the few disadvantages. Now, coming to the next concept, component of process of observation. So, what are the process of observation under this type of method? So, the first one is sensation. So, it is gained through sense organs. It depends upon the physical attentiveness and keenness of the observer. I have told you there should be a skill observer under observation method. So, the first process is that sensation. So, he should be capable of seeing each and everything, that is observing each and everything of the respondents. So, by observation itself, the observer will know the nature of the respondents. So, he should be a keen observer. Next one is attention. It depends upon the ability of the observer to concentrate on the concerned studies. So, he has to focus, he has to give more attention on the subject what he has to collect the information. So, he has to know the problem, and in order to solve that problem, for which he has to give more importance. Next one is perception. It comprises the interpretation of the sensory reports. So, whatever he has observed, he has to make note of everything, and it depends upon the interpretation of that report. That is, what do you mean by interpretation? Here, the researchers or the observer, how he has collected the information in the same way, it cannot be written in the research report. So, it has to be written in such a way that it has to be interpreted to the users. In the sense, it should be understandable in the user's point of view. That is known as interpretation. That is, first is sensation, next one is attention, and the third one is perception. That is, how the observer will interpret that research activity, how we will interpret the information which is collected from the respondents. Now, coming to the next one, types of observation method. So in the observation method itself, there are various types. So we shall discuss here. So the first one is audit method. So we have already seen in that chart. So what are the types of observation method? So the first one is audit method. So under audit method are carried out on the consumers and on the distribution of goods. So mainly this audit method is suitable on consumers and on distribution of goods. The stores are selected for this purpose. So what they are going to do? They are going to select a particular store. So where they are going to study about the consumer and distribution of goods. The selected store is scrutinized to collect the information on the purchase, sale, special promotions and prices of each brand. Now under audit method, what they are going to do? They are going to select a particular store where they are going to see the behavior of the consumer based on purchase, sale, special promotion and prices of each and every product or even the brand of a product. So marketing managers, so here the marketing managers are used here. Marketing managers measure the market performance and the effectiveness of changes. So how the marketing is going on? So based on the consumer taste and preference, how the marketing of a particular product is going on, so that will be observed carefully. The audit method thus helps to identify the effectiveness of market size. Of course, market plays a very important role for each and every product. So if the product wants to be successful, then it has to have a good market. So in the sense, the consumer has to like that product. So that we can call it as it has a good market. So here under audit method, it helps to identify the effectiveness of market size, market structure, market share, buying pattern and selling process strategies. So it all depends upon the marketing activities. Next, second method is recording method. So first method we have already discussed. Under audit method, here the researcher is going to select a particular store and see each and every activities relating to the marketing. So how the respondents or how the consumer will respond to a particular product. It may be relating to purchase, sales, brand or the invention of a new product. So how they are going to respond? Because the main intention of each and every organization is to sustain in the market. That is each and every business to sustain in the market. For that reason, they will go for audit method. Now coming to the second one, recording method. Now recording method is the most important method of observation. Let us see how this recording will be conducted in observation method. In this method, information and facts are recorded using electronic devices. So the main thing what they are going to use is electronic devices to record each and every activities. Such devices are used in investigations of the experimental method and to study the natural behavior of the participants, how the respondents will react. So everything will be recorded through electronic devices. This study is conducted by using such device as cameras. So the main thing which is used in order to record, that is cameras. So the electronic device will be camera here. So pre-test advertising is a prime example of laboratory study. Now, what do you mean by pre-test advertising? That is, whenever they launch a new advertisement, how the respondents or how the consumer will respond on that. So, that will be pre-tested. So, pre-test advertising is a prime example of laboratory study. That is, before going global, what they will do? They will select a group of people, they will give that advertisement, that is, they will play that advertisement and see how the reactions of that particular respondents will be. So, if it is good, then they can go for global. So, thinking that the advertisement will become successful after seeing the reactions of the respondents through cameras. So, pre-test advertising is a pre-example or the prime example of laboratory study. Cameras capture how a consumer eyes move over a particular location of the goods. So, how the consumer will react on a particular advertisement. So, cameras capture the way in which the consumer observe the advertisement. So, how attractive the advertisement is. So, before going global, what they will do? In a confined laboratory, they are going to test on certain respondents. So how they will react on a particular advertisement. So what they will see, whether they will see the size of the product, or whether they will see the product name, or whether they will see the brand name, or whether they will see the price, everything they are going to capture in the cameras. Next one is behavioral studies. So what do you mean by behavior studies? Here they are going to study the behavior of human beings. So the most common method of gathering information is to directly observe the behavior of the respondents or consumer, how they behave. So under recording method, they are going to record in cameras. But in case of behavior method, they are going to clearly observe the behavior of the respondents or consumers. The way in which consumer behave in shops or stores is studied by direct observation method. Here they are going to directly observe, whereas in recording method they used to use the cameras and observe the reaction. Here they are going to directly observe the reaction of the consumer or respondent on a particular store in relation to a particular product. For this purpose, the researcher will seek the help of sales representatives. So, in each and every store, there will be sales representative. So, the researcher, what he will do, he will consult the sales representative and tell him to observe each and every activities of the consumers. So, sales representative working in the shop, the sales representative observe the behavior of consumers inside the shop. So, what the sales representative will do? He will observe the reactions of the consumer. The method of purchase, the impression over a brand, the opinion about packing, etc. are observed by sales representative. So, here sales representative in a store will observe each and every activities of the consumers, and thereby that information will be communicated to the researcher at last. So, this is about your behavior studies. So, in my next session, we are going to discuss about sources of primary data, that is we are discussing now. Under that, we have discussed today about observation method. In my next session, I am going to discuss about communication method. So, it is also one of the type of primary data where I am going to discuss about communication method. So, my dear students, today we have discussed all the sources. We have learned what is this observation method and what are the sources to collect data under observation method. In my next session, I am going to discuss the next method, that is communication method. How the data will be collected, how the primary data will be collected through communication method. So, hope you have understood today's session. See you all in my next session with a new topic. Till then, take care. Thank you.